All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Consciousness Podcast. Today I'm actually recording a video conversation. Now, whether or not I share the video, publish the video, I'm not sure, but I've never actually had a podcast conversation where we've chatted through video, so I'm excited to see how it kind of changes things. And today I got a really special and exciting guest. Redtail Hawk is here. And we're gonna talk. We're gonna talk about some of the things that you may have heard on Princey's podcast. I know he's been on a lot of. You've been on a lot of different shows, and it sounds like from our conversation over the past couple months, because I reached out shortly after your most recent bout on the Once Bitten podcast. I reached out, and you were always updating me about the things you were adding and how you were tightening it up, and because it's the way that I view it, it's almost become like a presentation or a book, almost like a lecture that you're presenting. And this is just such a cool passion project, and I'm always fascinated to hear your conversations, and now honored to be a part of one. So I'm super excited, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. It's definitely been a long time coming.
Yeah.
When I did a few of like longer form episodes on different shows, what wound up happening was, number one, I'm always trying to improve, and there were, I'm probably my biggest critic, and I will try and streamline my content or make it more palatable, more understandable, what have you. But also, as people viewed it, they liked what they heard and found themselves in the position of wanting to contribute things that I hadn't talked about, that they found to be connected or, related or consistent in some way with the ideas that I had expressed. So as I fielded those replies, that feedback, I started keeping a list of bullet points in my presentation notes kind of at the bottom, and the feedback, the replies, it was all random, depending on who it was and what they knew that connected with what I had been talking about. So I did my best to kind of group stuff together, and I just kind of left it in short bullet point form, but it needed to be integrated into the overall presentation notes. And there's just so many, I guess, points that are dots that I'm going to connect over the course of these episodes. It's really easy for me to get off track or go off on a tangent and lose my way back to the main point, or
Yeah, I have the same problem.
So I felt like it was important to pre-script, prepare a good order to present all of these things in, so that it's organized and I don't miss anything. I'll probably miss something. I'm sure I'll keep finding things until I wind up publishing the book. But yeah, I'm doing the best I can with it, and I've definitely compiled a lot of material that I think a Bitcoin consciousness audience member is going to appreciate a lot.
Yeah, awesome. So it has become a rather decentralized project. It sounds like there's a lot of people who have kind of pointed you different directions, and you found a lot of that stuff really useful and built upon it.
Yeah, I find myself in a position where a lot of the material has come from plebs, from Bitcoiners,
Right.
Not just reading books from a bunch of different traditions, or not just watching YouTube reports on philosopher X or tradition Y. It's been very much a decentralized effort it's that's the great work, I think, is to love your neighbors
Yeah.
as yourself. And if somebody has something to offer, the key is to be receptive and
Hmm.
treat them as though they've got something worth hearing. And you can't just, I guess, necessarily believe hook, line, and sinker anything you hear the first time you hear it. There's some amount of discernment that's appropriate, but that discernment needs to be, I guess, worn almost like a suit of armor that enables one to travel outside of one's own base camp
Hmm.
and feel free to go visit others in their
Right.
camps where you
Yeah.
might not be as comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it gives you a a power of responsibility to the self to not get lost whenever you're going out on these other adventures. I think that the unfortunate part of so much of what we go through as kids is effectively getting used to all of these authorities in our lives, whether it be the teacher, whether it be the parent too, but the TV screen, somebody in a suit on a TV screen telling you a specific perspective is the truth. Yeah, and so this is kind of like the basis of critical thinking effectively, right? And you and I were talking just before we started about the concept of truth and what is objectively true. And objective truth is something that, for very complicated issues, can be very difficult to arrive at. And I think that part of the reason it is so hard to have an objective truth when it comes to the stuff that you are studying in particular is that there is so the information there's so much information out there, but it's like incomplete everywhere. So it's like a bunch of pieces of almost the same exact puzzle, but the picture in the puzzle has been taken from over here, 1,000 miles to the west, or 1,000 miles up and up into the sky, or 1,000 miles below. It's like the same picture, but the puzzle pieces don't fit together but you can get a general sense of, and this is this idea of consilience that you were talking about before.
Yeah. I I also think of it like a giant puzzle. I love puzzles. I used to teach math and critical thinking at a supplemental enrichment learning center
Oh
after
yeah.
school and weekends, kind of a thing.
Hmm.
And this process, I've seen it, like, all of these traditions are a mixture of baby and bathwater. And so you have this trash bag full of puzzle pieces that is labeled tradition X, and another trash bag full of puzzle pieces labeled tradition Y, etc. And I've just been trying to go through them, looking at all the puzzle pieces that are in each bag, sorting them, categorizing them, and looking for ways that they line up. And not necessarily throwing out anything that initially I consider to be bathwater, but it's more setting it aside for now, putting it on the back burner of the stove to
Hmm.
simmer and circle back to for
Hmm.
later. And yeah, it's been a process of trying to put together all these puzzle pieces into one big puzzle. And the 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 objective truth is, whenever we attempt to offer an articulation of the objective truth, it's necessarily going to be distorted. There's no way of getting around that. So, I mean, language itself is an imperfect set of tools to describe the world around us. Our perceptions are limited by, the visual light spectrum or the audible noise spectrum, etc. So everything is really a distortion of sort of the one ultimate truth, all is one. And even that, as simple and concise as that is, is still a distortion
Mm-hmm.
of the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I had a conversation with Jake Woodhouse, and in that conversation we talked about how religions can evolve or change over time, and it could be, it's the exact same thing. It's like we we have an experience as individuals, and it's extremely powerful, but it can only be experienced. That actual experience, the true experience of that present moment comes with the unique experience of me being in my own body. And so I can relay it through my voice or through writing, but it ultimately distorts it when I do that, and it limits it. And this is kind of the thing that's tough about religion, is that over time and over generations, it's like a giant generational game of telephone. Even if the people in that generational game of telephone had the absolute best of intentions, things warp and change, and but then on top of it, now you have humans who are corrupt. You have humans who are seeking more power and more control. So it, yeah, and that, for anybody who's joining, who just is coming to hear another conversation with Red and has not heard any Bitcoin consciousness, or not familiar with what it is, effectively it is a community of people who are exploring their highest self, exploring the objective spiritual experiences that they can, and we're sort of like, and you can come from any kind of religion. Maybe you don't have a specific religion. Maybe it's just, it's just you. There's a lot of people who are not necessarily religious, but very, very spiritual. So we call it connecting with your highest self, or your node, your inner node. Yeah, and so it is fun because we do exchange a lot of stories, and a lot of things in our own experiences, and there's a lot of things going on astronomically that are very, is that word, in the astrological charts, that are, we all find kind of relatable and interesting. And again, it's not like, okay, astrology is the religion here. Instead, it is a point of reference. It is, okay, I'm noticing some patterns going on in my life. How can astrology relate to this? Is anybody else relating to these patterns? This kind of thing. So I think that there is, I think maybe objective truth doesn't, I just don't, it feels so uncomfortable saying it, but objective truth doesn't exist in the sense that we define it, as in the second that you do define objective truth, it perverts it a little bit. It's impossible to like give it that, but so I would say it's more of like the objective truth is like an average truth. Like if I have a glass of water on the table, that is an average observation. Yes, we could say that's the objective truth. It is an average of observations. But then when it comes to the details of that scene, the colors, the feel, even the emotional feeling of the room, but like the temperature, the taste, all that kind of stuff, there is no objective truth. So I think, and I love exploring mental models too in philosophy. So I'm always very interested in reconciling the heart and mind, or getting them to work more in unison with one another, because I think that I know from my heart that the heart is a primary mechanism of this human experience, but the mind is basically taking and translating what the heart is experiencing, I guess, and that's like living through the highest self, kind of. So
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Jake Woodhouse. He reached out, and he just started homeschooling, and I had told him that if he wanted to have a primer conversation, that's one of my wheelhouse subjects, given my experience teaching at a supplemental education center. And so I'll probably be doing a show with him on probably primarily education, but I imagine that we'll be getting into some of the stuff that we're going to go through
Sure.
together
Yeah, he's very
on that
interested in
video
that
too.
stuff too, and on all of this. Yeah.
As for the game of telephone, that was spot on. That's what I say all the time. It's a perfect analogy for what happens, and it's also a key to understanding sort of how to interpret language phonetically by observing the leaps and realizing that, well, transmission of words between people doesn't always come with spelling. It's oftentimes just verbal, from mouth to ear, and so they come up with a way of spelling it, and it becomes distorted. But it's really the same word, it's the same concept,
Hmm.
and it just sort of drifts with time.
Yeah. It'd only
Um,
take one leader to like mishear a word and write it down and take it back to his people to just completely change the course of history.
right. And as for, I guess, objective truth, my thought is that there is some font from which truth emanates, and we're like fish in that body of water that font feeds out into.
Hmm.
And my goal is to try and swim around so much that I'm able to take sort of different readings just with the senses that I have,
Hmm.
and try to triangulate where is that font, where is, and get myself as close to it as possible in the process.
Hmm.
So I think that's maybe the consilience. It kind of reminds me of, like, you know, on those detective shows where they're trying to catch the bad guy who by using his cell phone or something, and they're pinging cell phone towers, and you ping 3 towers, and based on how the ping time you can figure out, like, through triangulation, okay, he's this far away from this tower, he's this far away from this other tower, and he's this far away from this third tower. We can narrow down where this guy is based on that.
Hmm.
That's I think maybe the consilience factor that we're
Yeah, I think
talking
that's an
about there.
excellent analogy. Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, even in that example, each tower is going to have, even with modern technology, is going to have discrepancies. They're going to be differing by inches or feet. So it's like you're going to get a radius when it comes to that triangulation. It's like this person is within this radius, you know. And I think that part of what we are struggling so much with worldwide, you know, I look at us here politically in the United States and basically how we cannot even have candid conversations with one another anymore. I think it has a lot to do with basically feeling so uncomfortable not not having an objective truth, right? Because we're just like, I don't know, we have been so molded into this box to see the world as black or white. It is either this or this. But instead, it doesn't. The more that I learn, and like from people like you, and more books that I read, there is truth in absolutely everything. And the only thing that anyone knows or should know, I guess, is that they actually know nothing. You know, so so yeah, I think that the more that we can have conversations like this, where we're just like being honest with that, just because we say one thing or have a pretty strong sense that one thing has quite a bit of weight or quite a bit of truth, doesn't mean that that cannot change, right? Cannot grow, cannot evolve. We're constantly learning, and it wasn't really until I got out of school that I started to kind of gain my passion for learning back again, because I was so excited to be done with school, because that's what I thought learning was. And now that I'm down the spiritual path, and I'm sure you're very similar to me, because obviously this is a passion project for you. You know, it's like, gosh, there's just so much I had no idea was even out there as far as human knowledge and human understanding. And so anyway.
That's I was raised Roman Catholic. I was steeped in that tradition, and around college, I took philosophy 101, And all of a sudden, I was introduced to all of these various philosophies that I was unable to refute. And so I had to be honest with myself and take a step back to like an open-minded agnosticism. And I remember at that time thinking to myself, dude, this is going to drive you nuts. Like, where do you even start? There's so much out there, and everybody is, saying, well, my way or the highway. And so I think at that point in time, I made the decision that I needed a distraction. And so I chose sports, professional and college sports, and also fantasy sports, because that was something that I could use to occupy my attention year round. There was always going to be games pretty much every day, unless it was a holiday, in which case there's holiday stuff to focus on.
Right.
And, it would give me ways to relate to people. I enjoy sports. I still enjoy it. It's poetry in motion, but like, at this point, you know, I don't pay attention to the standings. I don't pay attention to championships. I don't pay attention to drafts or Hall of Fame inductions or really anything like that. I mean, if a cool play happens to scroll across my social media feed, I might watch it because, I have an appreciation for the talent and the difficulty of the things that high level athletes can do. But yeah, when I experienced something in 2018, it was that very next fantasy season that started up. It was my last fantasy baseball season in early 2019. I think I paid attention for maybe the first few weeks, if that. But at that point in time, I was already my bell had been rung by that experience, and I had begun the very early stages of seeking answers to what it was that I had experienced. At this point, I mean, I still enjoy, Hollywood movies or TV shows, but at this point, I'm looking through them, mining them for esoteric symbolism and whatnot.
Yeah.
I mean, I just ran across one that Ava on Noster posted. It was a 1981 show, and I just saw immediately in the superhero's symbol on his chest, like, oh, it's a hero and that's the symbol? You've got to be kidding me. Those people who wrote that show and produced it, they were in the know, because it lined up beautifully with so much of the research that I've accumulated at this point. And that's now where I am. Talking earlier about puzzles, to, I guess, maybe borrow the Chicken Little idea, running around, the sky is falling, right? It's not the sky that's falling for me anymore. It's puzzle pieces that are falling out of social media, out of people's responses, their feedback, and they're falling right in place, right where they need to be in the puzzle.
Yeah.
There's a word, paranoia, that people are familiar with, most likely, where, you're concerned that things are out to get you. But the sort of opposite word, or that people are maybe less familiar with, is pronoia, which is the feeling that the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, is conspiring to support you. And that's very much where I'm at now. For example, I've been reading through Fulcanelli, who died about 100 years ago. He's a French hermeticist, and he just keeps dropping bombs, and they're wonderful. He keeps saying things that I've been saying for months or years at this point. He actually yielded the subtitle of the book that I'm working towards publishing. Hopefully I'll have that done this year. Cool. I had the main title for a long time. It was always going to be a ripoff of Shakespeare's Juliet, who said, "What's in a name?" Right? Mm-hmm. Talking about Romeo. Why does the name matter? Why Romeo Montague? Well, my family, the Capulets, are mortal enemies of the Montague family. Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Why are you Romeo? Why can't you be Bob? Why can't you be Caleb? Why can't you be John? Like, this name Romeo, what does it even mean? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet, right? So that's the sort of mind space I was in when I received the name Red-tailed hawk from a medicine man just over 3 years ago, and that was what catalyzed this ongoing research bender. The subtitle of the book is The Language of the Birds. So it's a question and an answer. What's in a name? The language of the birds. When you dig into these words, there are profound and deep truths. It's like people talk about how numbers don't lie, but mathematicians can use numbers to support lies, right?
Yeah. Right.
Going back to fantasy sports, the ESPN fantasy analyst and writer Matthew Berry at one point was talking about the same quarterback, but he was cherry picking different stats to make the case that this should be the number one overall pick in your fantasy drafts this year, or this person shouldn't even get drafted at all in any draft round in any league, even the deepest of leagues. So it, numbers tell the truth, but people can use numbers to tell lies.
Yeah.
And along that same line, words may be what lies are composed of, but words themselves contain very profound truths.
Yeah, speaking of that, you had said paranoia, and it made me think of the word parar in Spanish, P-A-R-A-R, which means to stop. And so the little Spanish that I do know, so there's para, which is P-A-R-A, which can mean for. So it's sort of like for as in like this is for you, right? And so it's sort of, with that word, it is like you have an infinite catalog of things that you can have, but it stops here, right? This is the limitation that you get with it. To stop, obviously, parar is to stop. So whereas, let's see, and then the other one that I thought of was I think it's esperar, which is esperar is to wait. To wait, yeah. So that would also include stopping, right? So it's like paranoia is a resistance to flow of energy, you could say. Whereas you said pronoia, yeah.
Yes.
Pronoia is then allowing that energy to flow and to support you.
Reminds me of that sailboat meme where people are like, you can't control the winds, but you can adjust your sails, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Go with the flow.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think that really is where some of this, a lot of this discomfort comes from, because the truth is constantly being shown from so many different lenses. It's like being projected. Okay, so if you almost think of like the allegory of the cave, but maybe turn it a little bit more three-dimensional, where the shadows are coming from all, like a ring, all around you. So they're coming from all of these different perspectives. And because truth has been, it's been made comfortable to be so black and white, that when you see all of these other perspectives, you have to be able to move into pronoia. You have to be able to move into flowing with new information that doesn't completely fit the black or white model that you have of the world.
Yeah, there have definitely been times where I've encountered ideas from people where at that point in time, it didn't mesh with the perspective that my research had distilled. And then later on, as I continued to seek and find, eventually it worked its way into the perspective, and oftentimes in a very important way. So I think of that meme where it's some weird shape, and you have the red light is shining on it, and it casts a square shadow over on the wall, and then you've got the blue light from above, and it's casting a circular shadow below, and then you got the green light shining on it from the side, and it's casting a triangular shadow, or the elephant meme, where you've got all these people who are trying to declare what this elephant is, and they're all blind. And one person is, feeling the tail, one person is feeling the
Yeah.
trunk, one person is feeling the ears.
It's all the same
and
thing.
they've
Yeah.
all just got a piece of the puzzle, but they're all sort of rushing to conclusions about what it is that they're experiencing, when if they all combined the various puzzle pieces that they've accumulated, or better yet, if they all rotated around and said, okay, I'm going to go and check out what this guy said over here and check out the ear. Okay, now I'm going to go check out the trunk. Now I'm going to go check out the tail. Eventually, you have enough information to where you've got, at the very least, a less distorted model than you otherwise would have had you remained in the same place, stopping, right? Waiting, paranoia, right? So pro is forward motion, right? So you've got to go explore. This lines up with the eye of the needle parable that Jesus preached. It also lines up with the empty cup Zen koan. The empty cup Zen koan. There was a Japanese master sometime in the 1800s, and a professor came to visit him. And before they began talking, Nanin, the master, started serving tea. And so he pours the professor's cup full of tea, but then he keeps on pouring. And the professor's, he's freaking out, like, you're spilling tea. What are you doing? The cup is full. No more will go in.
Yeah.
And Nanin says, yeah, you're like this cup. You come here and you're full of your own speculations and ideas. How can I show you Zen unless you empty your cup? So there's the eye of the needle was an evening port through the wall of a city, and it was very small intentionally, because it was unguarded, and you didn't want to just let people in with a bunch of stuff on their saddlebags. Maybe people would bring in weaponry or whatever, or they'd carry stuff out. So you pretty much had to take the saddlebags off of your camel in order to get it through that hole. You want to bring your camel inside to get it food and water and give it, safety overnight. But a wealthy person who would have a lot of stuff in their saddlebags might think, well, if I take these saddlebags off and leave them outside this gate here, it's going to get taxed, if not outright stolen. And let's be honest, which is totally not honest, right? Let's be honest. What could possibly be inside this city that's worth me losing all this stuff? Well, you don't know until you go look.
Yeah.
You could find the love of your life. You could find your long lost dog. Maybe your kid got, taken in a raid by some, marauders or something years ago, and their kid's all grown up, and you run across them. Maybe it's the guru who has the answers to life, the universe, and everything. Maybe it's greater opportunity and riches than you would be sacrificing by leaving your saddlebags outside. You got to go look under every rock and behind every door. If you don't know what you're missing out on. You have to pay the cost to learn. That's the key. You got to dump your cup out and rinse out your cup in order to really try the brew that the Zen master has prepared for you.
I love that parable. That's super cool. And through my spiritual journey and a lot of the healing work that I've done, it's amazing to see how many of these saddles have sort of fallen off. And the way that I see the world, it's like, gosh, it is kind of silly to be so attached to that idea. So actually, a really good one that's relatable to you is this concept of education. Like it now, and this has only happened in the past couple of years, but it completely blows my mind, the concept of school in general. Like, and my son, he's in kindergarten right now, and we did basically do like a homeschool kind of preschool for a year, and ultimately, he's trying kindergarten now for quite a few different reasons. I'm hoping that he'll someday want to come back to homeschooling, but when he comes home with good marks, and it's like, oh, you're writing in between the lines like you're supposed to. You're basically following the instructions. You're sitting quietly with all of your peers and sort of like under duress of being ashamed to kind of be yourself and explore the world and the way that you want to explore it. You're doing all the things that you're supposed to be doing, and I should be proud of that as a parent. Like, this, to me, this was baggage at one point. This is a way that I saw the world for so much of my, I guess, conscious life, or maybe the life after being a young child, right? Where I started really going for these external things. It's like, okay, I can't find the unconditional love that I once had unless I do these things. And so now, yeah, like, he comes home with these marks and stuff, and I have a really hard time genuinely being like, son, I'm proud of you. I think here's the thing. I am proud of him because I know he's working so hard. And ultimately, I think that the reason that he is doing that, which is so sad, is because he just wants love. Like, kids just want love. Any human being ultimately just wants love. I think that maybe even before any of the other needs, right? If we have love, that's like, we can be at peace. And so it's really hard for me to not be proud of it, because I am proud of him. I'm proud of I'm proud of what he's doing, but I feel bad. Like, it hurts me to see him have to warp himself into this box.
I wrote a poem the week after my spiritual awakening in 2018. I don't know if you've ever seen it before, but if you want, I can share it now.
That would be great.
All right, it's called The Light in the Mirror. Ignorance is bliss, they say. Children laughing as they play aren't even ignorant. Training takes their innocence. Expression of the true self, scolded, forced onto the shelf. Listen here, act like this. Temporary happiness, what one gets when one commits to change on words from false prophets. The lizard brain perceived the threats, weighed the costs and benefits. Chameleons change, adapt, survive, not themselves, but sure, alive. Eternal is identity, pain when I cannot be me, suffering and wearing masks, different ones for different tasks. Some layers shown, some I hide. Social acceptance is my guide. Deep down, nobody wants this. Going on can seem hopeless. Stars align with lightning flash. Someone sees right through my masks. Notions preconceived now shatter. Rules are breaking. Time, space, matter. Fascination? Furious? How can I explain all this? Lost control, can't hide myself. Light now shining on that shelf. I pick me up, I turn me round, finding all there's to be found. Gently though, with love and care, blowing dust off in the air. I need cleaning and maintenance. Spit shine reveals old acquaintance. Time and effort, I am purged. Masks are shed, myself emerges in the mirror of my soul. Loving myself made me whole. how does that capture the sentiment you were just expressing about your son?
Man, that's a lot of emotion. That's beautiful.
Thank you. I don't normally write poems. That was truly a work of inspiration. I wrote another one like maybe a month, maybe 5 weeks before the awakening. I guess I was ramping up at that point,
Yeah,
getting ready to go Super Sun.
yeah,
And yeah, it's not something that I was like, I'm going to write a poem today. It was, oh, I'm receiving inspiration of some sort. I better capture this.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you were following pronoia there, right? The universe was supporting you. Your heart was supporting you.
Yeah.
So many directions I could take this. Let's just sit with it for a second. Yeah, so we're on the topic now of specifically of school, but we were talking about baggage, right? And there's still so much baggage on me as a parent that basically lead me to still do a lot of things which are out of the old fears, out of the old baggage, right? So, because if I truly felt the power, and if I truly embodied the power that I feel when it comes to trusting his intuition, trusting his highest self, to basically bring him a fruitful life. Because what we're talking about in this specific example is the fear of not having a fruitful, I would say financially fruitful life, and being quote unquote accepted in some kind of, again, baggage, black and white terms, having a lot of money, having a lot of quote unquote success or whatever. But ultimately, and this sounds new age, so it scares a part of me, but it's like, what does it matter if you're happy, right? Like, it's kind of like, what's in a name? What does it matter if you're genuinely happy and fulfilled? And yeah, you might be a hippie living in a shack on a beach, but if that's all you need to be happy, like, who am I to say that that's what you shouldn't be doing?
Right. I mean, Buddha said suffering is, the result
Wanting,
of attachments,
right,
right? So the question is, do we want to keep up with the Joneses,
right,
or would that be the opposite of releasing attachments? That would be chasing everything you don't have.
mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the idea of happiness is based upon expectations. What's the baseline? Well, if the baseline is, well, at least I'm not, being held captive in Guantanamo Bay, being tortured, then life is amazing.
Yeah, right.
So it's all about perspective and being appreciative of the things that we have, as opposed to focusing on the things that we don't, I guess.
You know, when you brought up what is happiness, again, can you define it? Is that you can't really, you really can't. That can never really be an objective truth, because everybody has their own happiness. Here in the United States, we have like a generally accepted idea of what happiness looks like. You have a family, successful, have money, you have the stuff, right? You have keeping up with the Joneses. But I think that when you genuinely get to know someone, everybody is still just lost and has been lost for a very long time at their core. And even if they try to define that happiness, like if you have a conversation with a person, and a long enough one at that, about if they win the lottery, if they could have anything in the world, like if you had the infinite money cheat code in this reality, what would you do? And I think that when I explore that, There's some things that it would be cool to have, but I can already sense and feel their hollowness and their emptiness, even just thinking about it. And that's, again, because happiness is never defined. Happiness is what you find in the present moment. It's what you find in flow.
I think if I had to define it for myself, which is perhaps the best I could do,
Right, yeah.
I developed 3 goals back when I was teaching at that learning center, and they were very, very specific and very much in a specific order. Goal number 1 was to understand. Goal number 2 was to be understood. Goal number 3 was to have a positive impact on the world. So as I've been doing this research, and I've been finding these moments of pronoia where the universe is offering me something that just fits perfectly into the rest of the perspective that has already been distilled from the research,
Mm-hmm.
I am genuinely happy
Mm-hmm.
in those moments.
Yeah.
And when I get to share that with others who are interested in that, and I see the happiness that that brings them, I'm happy to be of service to them in that
Mm-hmm.
way, and help them feel less uncertain and perhaps more grounded in their understanding, in their perspective. And yeah, I think the material possessions are nice. Connections with other people, though, whether it's them feeding me things, whether it's extemporaneous or somebody from 100 years ago or 500 years ago who I'm reading in a book feeding me something,
Mm-hmm.
those are that's where you get this sense of this feeling of communion. And I think that that feeling of communion is ultimately what everyone is living for. Maybe not
Mm-hmm.
everyone. I guess there's loners and hermits and whatnot out there, but I think the vast majority of people are interested in uniting and communing with maybe not everyone, but with others of like mind
Mm-hmm.
and of like spirit, I guess.
Right.
So that's perhaps the best I can define it for myself.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, that's how you create and build as a human being. There is an exponential effect when it comes to working with other people. It's my model of the universe is that every one of us is God, but in limited form, right? So, and that's what I have been explaining to my son, my 5-year-old, is because he really struggles with this aspect. I think most young kids do. I think they come from a place of limitlessness, and they come here where you are in a limited body, you have a limited personality, you have limited talents, you have limitations on what it is you want to do, what makes you feel good, what makes you not feel good. Like those things don't align with. Sometimes those things don't align with the generally accepted expectations. And see, I kind of lost my train of thought, but yeah. So I was saying that limitation. Yes.
We're all basically participating in the universe, which is God. It's like
Mm-hmm.
the Spinoza's model, or Giordano Bruno's model, that God is everything. And so you're made out of God, and my cat is made out of God,
Mm-hmm.
and this lamp that's behind my phone is made of God, and
Mm-hmm.
everything is made out of God.
Right.
So,
Everything is me.
you know,
Yeah. Exactly. And so, yeah, I mean, it's like being comfortable and loving yourself even in your limitation.
I think omniscience would probably be pretty boring after about 2 seconds,
Right.
because
Yeah.
it's completely devoid of novelty and discovery. And so I think the sort of the one infinite creator, God, whatever name we want to use, probably thought that, you know, diaspораting into a gajillion waves and particles, that eventually over the course of time form this interference pattern, and eventually they form, planets and solar systems, and then life springs up in the right conditions in various places, and eventually it evolves until the life forms are capable of housing some amount of spirit in them, and we are almost like the peephole on a front door, so you can see who's outside. We're apertures, but instead of just being a visual aperture like that peephole, we have five senses. We have five ways of offering feedback to the creator of itself. We are all the creator exploring the creator, and limited finite perspective. And it creates some interesting stuff that you got to figure like an omnipotent, omniscient being would never encounter, because it's just dumb. It's like we're God's source of Darwin Awards. We're entertainment. The stuff that we get into is just so absurd at times. You got to figure that on the other side, the spirits, the angels, the lowercase g gods, goddesses, the interdimensional aliens, whatever's all out there, is observing, and they're just laughing their behinds off at the situations that we get into, the mindsets that we get into. It's got to be super entertaining for them, I have to imagine.
I had a session with Sam, who he started the podcast and the community, and in that particular session, we just couldn't stop laughing. We were channeling we were connected to channeling, whatever you want to call it, some kind of energy which saw everything we were going through from a higher perspective, and just how trivial it all was. I mean, it is truly, truly trivial, and I think being able, this is like the perspective of the child, right? Is nothing is important to the child other than, I guess, their mom and dad. And that's what's important to them. But everything else is just for fun. Like, their work, their job is to play and to experience the world and to throw stuff around. And then we sort of get diluted by ideas of what is important. What should we be striving for? And
you get out of the moment. They when they're playing, they're totally in the moment. They're not only that, they're abiding the golden rule by playing with narratives and playing with roles. And that's something that we wind up getting out of oftentimes as adults. We have to pick a role, or pick a handful of roles, and then try to do those things as best we can. And we get out of practice of steel manning other people's perspectives, and we just get wrapped up in our own perspective. I think children are the closest to God. They were most recently on the other side. And also during the first 7 years, well, not the first 7 years, but from roughly age 2 to 7, the brain is in a theta dominant neural oscillation pattern, which is associated with meditation, hypnosis, a number of important things. So, kids are definitely in the zone, especially during those early years. So,
yeah, I'm just thinking it would be really cool to have you go down and do, I don't know, some sessions or some teaching or something down in El Salvador. So Sam has recently moved down there, and he started up what he has named the Decentralized Learning Center. So basically, it's like a spiritual retreat. It's for anybody, families included. If you're unschooling and you just want to teach kids about spirituality or more philosophical things like we're discussing. So I think you could have a really, really powerful role on more the mental side of things, because for me, I still feel very good with kind of massaging that mental muscle, and by dropping a lot of the mental baggage and patterns, and it sort of relaxes the nervous system. So then the heart, the guidance of the heart, the guidance of intuition, the God guidance can become more powerful in the way that I experience the world and see it. And I think a lot of people are looking for that too. And that's part of what's really cool about the podcast is it's coming in through the ears. It's coming in through the mind. It is supposed to be mentally expansive, at times, and some other, like we've done some meditations and stuff through the podcast as well. But a lot of them are mental conversations. They are speaking to the brain and expanding it the way that it sees things. So
that's looking more and more likely to happen. Me going down to El Salvador at some point. It might not be for a few years, but my best friend is planning on moving down there after his daughter graduates. So I will probably have a place to stay to go visit and perhaps scout out a place to set up a residence of my own.
Yeah.
Once he's set up down there.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know the ancient history of that region too, because I'm sure there's some ancient vibrations that have kind of broken through, and this is, for the country to be named the savior is, and to adopt Bitcoin is just crazy to me, and to go from one of the darkest places on earth to now showing some of the brightest signs of love and light, it really makes you laugh because God has a sense of humor. The universe has a sense of humor, It's just, it's amazing. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Some of the material that I want to share with you will cover, some of the earliest humans to walk through South, Central, and North America, and where did they come from, and where else did their fellow immigrants from their motherland, where did they travel to, and how does that link in to things? There's it's just so much to get into on that front, but I definitely have some stuff on that to share at some point.
Mm-hmm. So what are you doing for a living right now? Because you seem very, very passionate about this stuff. I'm sure that it would be really hard to go to some fiat mine and.
I cannot express to you how much I want to start doing my research full time.
Yeah.
Beyond the first book, beyond the study groups, beyond podcast, websites, speaking appearances, teaching. I want to also do deep dives on a number of spiritual books, the Bible, the I Ching, the Bhagavad Gita, the Popol Vuh, et cetera, and just do like Cliff's Notes, but it'll be Red's Notes, and it'll be taking the perspective that my research has distilled and then applying it and going in depth on each of these books and giving people who liked that perspective the opportunity to do a study on these other books that's a deeper dive with commentary throughout. As far as my fiat mining job, I work for a mechanical contractor. For a number of years, I did energy work, modeling buildings and figuring out what tweaks, what projects, what adjustments could be made to the building to make it more energy efficient, helping with the sales part of the process by giving the salespeople the economic numbers to offer the prospective customer and say, okay, well, if you spend $100,000 doing X, Y, and Z, you're going to get $25,000 back in incentives and rebates from the local utilities. You're going to save $28,000 a year. So in just under 3 years, you're going to get all of your investment back and you'll be saving this much per year. And so it's felt really good to be able to apply my analytical, mathematical side to something that is beneficial to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been part of it. I've also been, I've done some design work for like HVAC systems, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. I've done some programming work in mostly like Microsoft Excel, trying to help create estimating cost sheets for the company that they use to figure out how much it's going to cost us to perform a specific scope of work,
Mm-hmm.
and how to make sure that we cover ourselves and then make an appropriate amount of profit to cover overhead and be a profitable company.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I've done since I stopped working at that learning center. Funny enough, I worked for a husband and a wife. The wife ran the learning center, and then I transitioned to working for her husband at the contracting firm.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, my background is in engineering and construction as well. That was what I was. Formally trained, I guess, in engineering, and then I did construction work for a few years before I became a stay-at-home dad. I started like an online business because I wanted more flexibility to be with the kids, and the online business wasn't making me happy. It wasn't working out. So I became then really dedicated full time to be full time with the kids. So, are you an INTJ?
I ride the line between INTJ and INTP, so I'm a perfect fit for a Bitcoiner, according to that Myers-Briggs poll that Brandon Quittem did on Twitter a few years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah. What's IM? So what's the P in INTP?
I think the P and J types are judging, P is perceiving. So
Mm,
the judging types are the types to land on a conclusion and then just stick with it and that they've judged it, that they're firm in that is the answer.
mm-hmm.
Whereas the perceivers are perhaps more open to exploring options and coming up with other ways of thinking about things,
Mm-hmm.
which perhaps is one of the reasons why I'm doing the research that I'm doing. I'm
Yeah.
perceiving ways that tradition X, Y, or Z is, accurate or perhaps distorted, and playing with those options and looking for the ways that one thread of truth may be able to tie them all together in a
Mm-hmm.
coherent way.
Right. I was to say when I was in school because I took that Myers Briggs when I was in college, and so I probably had a very different outlook on life. So I would be curious because I was INTJ, and I might be something completely different now. Who knows, But I definitely resonate more now with the INTP side of things. Yeah. All right. So we've been going for like an hour. We haven't got into anything yet, which is cool. Which is cool. I mean, we can. What do you think? What are you feeling we should do now? Because we could either do a little bit if there's like a good little bit you want to add, or perhaps we could just keep kind of riffing for a few more minutes and then just add another to the series. It's up to you.
Um, I think maybe we've been focusing largely on kind of the consciousness side of things and sort of the philosophical side of things.
Yeah.
It might not be, I've offered a few, I guess, origin story bits and pieces to your audience regarding that. I'll definitely get into that deeper with some of the content that I have prepared. It might not be the worst idea, given that it's a Bitcoin consciousness podcast, to sort of give a brief sort of Bitcoin origin story so people
Yeah.
know what kind of pleb they're dealing with, I
That'd be cool.
guess. All right. So I never paid much attention to economics growing up. I initially wanted to be a doctor. My now late younger brother had been diagnosed with juvenile type 1 diabetes on his 4th birthday. So I initially wanted to be a pediatric endocrinologist because that was the type of doctor that helped him. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, let me go help other kids who are in his position. I cared for him a lot. I was 9 years older than him and 11 years older than our sister. So when our parents were working, I was on point typically as the caretaker, which included having to do like the finger stick pricks to do the blood sugar metering or what have you, making sure that he got snacks when he needed snacks, that type of thing. In high school, which I went to a college prep school, I realized that if I wanted to be happy, I needed to do something that was going to make me happy, not necessarily something that was tugging at my heartstrings emotionally, like my brother's situation.
Right. Yeah.
So I wound up going into mechanical engineering. And at a certain point, it wasn't that I didn't like mechanical engineering anymore, it was that it wasn't the only thing that I liked. And so I took sort of a step back or maybe a step up to applied mathematics, which has, I think, maybe a wider umbrella that it covers more things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would be able to do different things like teaching or consulting or work as an actuary for insurance companies or still do engineering, which I wound up finding my way back to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in college, I like I said, I had that moment with spirituality, with religion, of uncertainty with respect to different philosophies. When I got out of college, I graduated into the Great Recession. It was winter of 2007. And, there's already that catch 22 of nobody wants to hire somebody unless they have 5 years of experience. Well, if I'm fresh out of school, how am I supposed to get 5 years of experience if everybody only wants to hire somebody with 5 years of experience?
Yeah.
So that I was already up against
That
that,
makes a
but
lot of
then
sense.
also, the entire economy was in shambles. And all through school, I was 99th percentile on my standardized tests, straight A student, good scores on ACT and SAT. And then I basically trip and fall flat on my face trying to launch from the education world into the professional world. And like I said, I'd never really studied economics and I had no idea what was going on. And so I just felt like a huge failure. And a number of family members who, in hindsight, probably felt threatened or what have you by my academic performance growing up, my trajectory in life, kind of took the opportunity to kick me when I was down, stab me when my back was turned, type of thing. And so I guess it was psychologically very difficult. It turned out to be difficult just to make ends meet. My credit score dropped into the 500 range. Student loans went into default. I was eating the cheapest food I could get, oftentimes free food, if it was expired. If I was working at a grocery store for a while, and if something was expired and we had to pull it from the shelf, oftentimes, I would take that back into the break room on my breaks and eat it, um, including sometimes even pulling food out of the trash as long as it was wrapped in something sanitary and I could, get at the food without it being gross. Um, at a certain point, I was couch surfing on relatives' couches or sleeping on a cot that I'd bought at like Dick's Sporting Goods or whatever. Um, at a certain point, there was friction with some family members, and I didn't feel comfortable staying in their homes anymore. So started sleeping in my car. Eventually, I started setting up my cot in like a back storage room at the learning center where I worked. And at one point, the director caught me, and that was kind of embarrassing. And it wasn't long after that I got an offer from her husband to start working for him. So I think that perhaps that was a pivotal moment. But yeah, when I got that opportunity, I had kind of a never again moment. Like that was a traumatic period. And so whenever somebody has gone through some kind of trauma, there's often a trauma response. And for me, that trauma response included very harsh self austerity measures. I continued with, I elevated my quality of living somewhat, but I tried to keep it, humble and continue with the momentum that I had, and trying to find cheap food and cheap housing and cheap vehicles, and just try and generally not spend money that I didn't need to spend. And eventually that led to an accumulation of savings, and I was able to rehabilitate my loans, my credit score. And then I started, learning about precious metals and very basic technical analysis of charts. And I think that eventually I started investing in precious metals. And not long after that, maybe 3 years or so after that, I started listening to, well, I was already listening to a podcast, and it wasn't focused on Bitcoin, but the host would occasionally talk about it. And it was like May of 2017, and the price started popping from like 1,200 a coin to like 1,800 a coin. And at that point, it was the, Futurama Fry, shut up and take my money moment, right? And at that point, I was like, okay, but I kind of get a little bit of what I just got into here, but I know I'm still lacking significantly in understanding, in economics, in networks, in all sorts of things. I mean, Bitcoin is a multi-branched rabbit hole, and they're all very deep paths. So I did what many Bitcoiners wind up doing. I started listening to lots of Bitcoin podcasts. I read books. I read articles. I, scrolled message boards and just tried to immerse myself in that scene. And so I've done my, 5 to 10,000 hours of Bitcoin education. And yeah, it was maybe, I guess, actually Bitcoin led me to getting my name too. If I wasn't taking, the message of Bitcoin, if I wasn't orange pilling a bunch of libertarians on this, Discord server, then I would not have met the person who offered me a remote encounter with her medicine man. And it was that remote encounter that yielded me the name Red Tail Hawk, and helped solve what at the time was a nearly 53-month long personal mystery of what happened to me in September of 2018, the spiritual awakening. That chasing the meaning of Red Tail Hawk is what led me to then chase other subjects like Kundalini and enlightenment, and how did those ideas tie into Christianity, because I grew up with that, so I was the most familiar with that. And there's like, what, 1 billion Christians in the world, and like, I'm very down with Jesus's teachings and stuff, but like, a lot of the practices seemed very rigid, or I don't know, that they just almost seemed like there was a lot of distortion that had crept into things from 2,000 years ago. And I very much wanted for Jesus to be like legit. And so I looked and looked and looked, and I found at a certain point, it dawned on me, oh, that's right, I've heard before that Jesus traveled. And if Jesus traveled, maybe he was learning from like other traditions. And so maybe there's some, proverbial Easter eggs, right, to use like gamer parlance, in the Bible somewhere that would indicate exactly that. And I wound up finding not just one thing, but multiple things. And yeah, it's been an incredible journey. So Bitcoin, a lot of people talk about how once they take the orange pill, they oftentimes experience some sort of a spiritual awakening of some sort. I call it the Bitcoin metanoia. And it's, I think, related to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you get into Bitcoin and you understand it well enough to have conviction, and you hodl through a cycle or two, at a certain point, one is sitting on probably a life-changing amount of purchasing power. And it's not to suggest that like wealth is necessary in order to ascend Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But at the same time, if your base level needs are satisfied, that affords you sort of mental RAM to focus on higher level things like love or career or personal accomplishments, or ultimately at the peak, self-actualization, which I think is essentially what a Kundalini awakening or an enlightenment experience. It's just another term for those types of things. So there is very much a path from Bitcoin to spirituality, and I'm just very thankful to Satoshi for giving me that opportunity to, crawl my way out of the fiat mines, hopefully sooner rather than later, but it'll happen. And without Satoshi and without Bitcoin, I wouldn't have been orange pilling people on that server. I wouldn't have had the medicine man encounter. I wouldn't have been given this name, and I wouldn't have a bookshelf with 250 books on it that I've collected in the last few years that I'm researching my way through. Like it's truly changed the trajectory of my life in ways that I could not have imagined if you'd asked me 20 years ago.
That's a great orange pill story for sure. The question that comes up for me is: are we, as Bitcoiners who are Bitcoin only, are we contradicting ourselves? Because we spoke the majority of the conversation about being open-minded, and basically that there is the truth is an average, I guess. So to say that the world should be running on this one money that is Bitcoin, and maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but that's what I believe. Is that a contradiction, do you think?
I think that a lot of Bitcoiners study altcoins. I think we study precious metals. We study rhinestones. We study wampum. So I think
True.
we're open to these things.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like going back to the Myers-Briggs, writing the line between P and J. There's a spectrum, but I think that a lot of us, not all of us, explore these other things because we're open-minded. That's one of the reasons I was interested in bringing my research to Bitcoiners, is because, Bitcoiners, generally speaking, have had the thought, well, what if everything I ever thought before now about money was wrong? And everybody who ever taught me anything about money also had the wool pulled over their eyes. And like that's an incredibly humble and honest thought.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that humility, it's that lack of ego that I think allows people to enter into the Bitcoin space. There's the number go up bros,
Yep.
who are here just to, get rich quick or whatever.
Right.
And there is that demographic contingent of the Bitcoiner community. And I would hazard to guess that that demographic is going to be more closed-minded, and the group that is all about exploring things and questioning our preconceived notions and looking over our shoulder. Like, I'm a mathematician. In order to prove something, there cannot be any counterexamples. So I've got to look over my shoulder.
Right.
There's an honesty to that. The same thing applies to the really good scientists that are out there who are, operating the scientific method.
Mm-hmm.
You've got
the good
to
scientists, right?
right. You've got to look over your shoulder. You've got to be open to what others are saying, and that's really the key. That's one of the ways that the world is largely out of balance. One of the two concepts that are related that I'm going to talk about in the content I've prepared are the divine masculine and the divine feminine. The, I guess, primary sort of definition or characteristic, I should say, of the divine feminine is receptivity. And that's what I see a dearth of, a lack of on this planet, is that people all want to push their perspective onto others in some sort of ideological Ponzi scheme where they get a dopamine hit, they get a mental cookie, an emotional cookie, when they convince someone new to join the pyramid level below them. Right now, they're moving up and they feel validated, and not for legitimate reasons, though. Not because real validation doesn't come from another person; it comes from within. It comes from that sort of innate knowing, or however you want to describe it.
Yep. Yeah, you'll never achieve. It's the same happiness we were talking about, keeping up with the Joneses and winning the lottery. That happiness is just, it's always far away. Just by definition, it's always in the distance. Yeah. So yeah, and you have exactly, or very, very similar answer, at least what I was going to say, as far as, are we contradicting ourselves? And I think that the reason that I've landed on one specific tool as a medium of exchange for humanity and a storage of wealth and value over time is effectively because I was open-minded, or I should say am open-minded, right? I look at it like this. As far as the altcoins go, to go specifically kind of into the altcoins. So let's just say that there is no more government money in the world, and there's like public money like Bitcoin, there's private money like Tether or whatever. Ultimately, kind of like what I think Brandon Quittem says this, money does just converge to one, and it's simply because human beings thrive on open standards. They thrive on having a standard across all of them. And while yes, we do have programs, or I guess we should, like, I look at here in the United States, we have the SAE system, and then across the pond, you have the metric system. So you do have two different systems, but they're super easily convertible. Basically, there is some kind of ratio which relates one to the other. Now, in the case of Bitcoin and some other kind of altcoin, let's just say that Ethereum sticks around for a long time. Bitcoin has a finite amount. We know exactly, it's verifiable. We know exactly how much is out there in the world. In the case of Ethereum, you do not. You have a predictable supply schedule. So you do have a way to essentially convert between the two. You have a way to, you could say, this currency is always inflating at this rate, and therefore, I know that the value of one Ethereum ultimately equals this many Bitcoin, right? So the way that I look at it is that there's still basically going to be like one base measure of value in the world, just like distance is an incremental measure between here and here. Value is value, just as distance is distance, right? It's a space between 2 points. How you measure it is totally up to you. So for me, it's really a simplification then of which money is the most fair. Which money, because that's really what I'm trying to go for here, is this system is so screwed up and it's so unfair that I want something that won't be able to go down, that is the least likely to go down that path of becoming super unfair, super corrupt money. And I think that the base value proposition of Bitcoin is actually in its decentralization, because it is the least likely to become corrupt compared to all of the other ones. And it did that simply by establishing its network effect first. And that's that's pretty much it, my explanation. So
Yeah, I agree. And like, I don't. You asked if we're contradicting ourselves. I mean, again, there's what, 3 groups of Bitcoiners. There's the people who are Bitcoin maxis, Bitcoin only. Then there's the Bitcoin only, but Monero is interesting and maybe has a valid use case. And then there's like Bitcoin and everything else as well, right? Whatever makes the number of fiat units in my portfolio go up higher, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're willing to gamble on Doge or Shiba Inu or any of the meme coins, that they tracking pumps and dumps and all that stuff. I think that it's not necessarily a contradiction to arrive at a conclusion. I think that it would be a contradiction if we arrived at a conclusion and didn't leave room for the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
If we didn't leave room for the unknown, we wouldn't even be here in the first place. So I think, I don't know that we're necessarily some people are, but I think that...
well, if they're speaking about it from a philosophical perspective, like we are, right, where truth is a measure of a bunch of different perspectives, and the complicated truth is like not such a simple thing. So, and I think that's what we're kind of describing here, is we are open-minded. We're just like, to us, it doesn't, unless something else changes, unless there's like some other really, really great need, which would be like privacy, for instance. You mentioned Monero. Like, if you don't feel comfortable that you cannot achieve the privacy you need with Bitcoin, and another tool, does that for you, and that tool is worth the trade-offs, then that's totally fine. But again, I am less concerned with the privacy, mainly because I think that as more people wake up to the idea of being able to store their value in this particular money, I think that the privacy will take care of itself as the network basically becomes worldwide. It'd just be impossible and it just won't matter, because it's going to be unstoppable anyway, just by sheer the open nature of it. So that's like my reasoning to, like, I don't really need that aspect. I don't need to make that sacrifice. And then, or do you need payments to go faster? Well, there are solutions already on Bitcoin to make payments go faster, So there's just not a lot out there that really grabs me, The only other thing I think that I'm very passionate about is decentralization and empowering the individual. And so, the concept of something like Ethereum, or I don't know, Ripple or Solana, whatever, these ones that claim to have decentralized programs on them, right? Like, I think that's an awesome idea. But I think that in practice, attaching it to a money, it doesn't add up. What I would prefer to support is basically open source software, open source protocols, and having that available for everybody, and then having the money integrate directly with it. Because like with Ethereum, as many Bitcoiners know, there is a lot of limitation when it comes to actually you're not truly decentralizing those programs. What's truly decentralized is somebody running a Start9 or an Umbro and running an instance of their own photo sharing app, or their own relay for Nostr, that kind of thing. That's truly decentralized, because you can come after me, but it doesn't take down the network. So yeah, that's how I look at that.
Then there's also, like, proof of work and Bitcoin's tether to thermodynamics and energy. It gives us a pathway as a human population to worldwide flourishing, and ideally it moves us closer to world peace. And so I'm going to root really hard for that and try and put myself behind that effort as much as I can. That's actually one of the ways that I'm hoping that my research can serve as like almost the closing pitcher. Let Bitcoin be the starter, let it run 8 innings, and then maybe my research can help close out the 9th. I see people like Jason Lowery talking about his thesis, Soft War, about how it's really just the broken window fallacy, that let's build drones and have them fight other drones, and then we'll just stand back in our respective camps and watch it happen and be like, ha, my drone beat up your drone. Like, what are we doing here? We're just destroying things that we didn't need to destroy. It would be better if we took the components that formed those drones and made IT racks and ASICs and nodes, and made the network more robust and earned some Bitcoin out of it. But the fact of the matter is, at present moment, there are bullets and bombs flying in the name of God. And, it might be a misallocation of capital to fund religiously motivated violence on a Bitcoin standard. But that doesn't mean that radical, dogmatists from X, Y, or Z religious tradition are going to acknowledge that that's a misallocation of capital. And I suspect that the most radical people, even on a Bitcoin standard, will still find a way of justifying, allocating capital towards religiously motivated violence. So I would like to see a world where the Tower of Babel era, where nobody speaks one another's language, has come to an end. It's like all of these traditions are silos. And when you go up a silo, there's other people in that silo. And the higher you get, there's all this specific niche silo specific language. And the people who are in that silo with you, they also speak that language. And so it's helpful to be able to communicate high level ideas with the other people that are in your silo, but you can't communicate with people that are on the ground, and you can't communicate with people that are in the other silos. Well, fortunately, I've found that there are all these bridges between the silos.
Right.
They're like dilapidated, and they need to be renovated, and have the wooden slats replaced and have the ropes redrawn, but they're there and they exist. So I would just like to be able to show everyone, hey, this is how you can love your neighbor, and go talk to them in their language. You can show them proof of work, right? Yeah. If you can speak someone else's words and you can show them that you understand their ways, they're going to feel loved, and they're going to feel valued and not dismissed as some siren of Satan who is leading you astray. That's my
Yeah.
ultimate goal, is to allow everyone to be able to speak one another's lingo and connect the dots and see for themselves, like, oh wow, everyone is actually pointing at the same general truths.
Right.
It's just that we've all been so afraid to come out of our base camps
Yeah.
to, go explore those other traditions.
Yeah, the structure becomes one of just a bunch of different individual little points to the structure becoming the web between all of those points. Those little points actually kind of fall off, and the web becomes what is left standing. So it's like you live amongst the web, able to freely move wherever you want instead of just stuck in this silo by yourselves.
Yeah, I'm glad you phrased it that way. That's very similar to how I describe it. It's like I've woven a tapestry of connections.
Mm-hmm.
And at first it was just a few strings connecting one string to another, then another, then another.
Yeah.
And at this point, the tapestry is so full, I feel like I can trampoline on it.
Right. Right. Are you super visual? Could you do build like it would be cool to play around with a mind map of all of your information.
Eventually, that's probably something that I need to do. Yes, I am very visual.
In
I was
construction, I would assume, yeah.
also I was into sports. I played a lot of
There you
sports,
go, yeah.
so
Yep.
visual processing is key.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a mind map would be really cool because you could have, depending on how you wanted to approach it, I mean, you could tag the information. There's so many cool note-taking programs you can tag information differently and probably have it automatically visualized, or even write your own, vibe code your own program to visualize it too. But you could tag it in such a way that you could have it reorganized by religion. So the nodes are all of the religions, and then the web between them, branches between them. Or you could maybe reframe it to, let's say the nodes would be how does things like supernatural supernatural abilities relate to, like ESP relate to remote viewing and who believed it, and that kind of thing. You could sort of have it dynamic like that.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting, and I'm guessing that at some point, whenever I release the book, somebody's going to take the PDF and dump it into an AI, and it'll start producing some pretty cool stuff. And
Seriously,
uh,
yeah.
I'm guessing somebody will wind up doing that if it's not me. So
Yeah.
I do look forward to seeing. Well, just like I said, with when I took my notes and I started adding bullet points to them because people started giving me feedback. Like I'm looking forward to the feedback loop as I continue to divulge more and more of what my research has yielded.
Yeah, I mean, you could name this book the first edition, or it's probably going to be multi-volume, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll probably have to do multi-volume, or yeah, like you said,
Editions based,
yeah.
block based. You could write publish on block, whatever. Cool. Well, I think this is probably a good place to stop. We didn't even get into any of the presentation stuff, but it's totally up to you because I want to be respectful of your time. But, if we want to break it down, we can go right into what we were hoping to kind of talk about tonight and then do two more after that. Well, we can figure that out, but I think people will come back and really enjoy it. I know, at least, if nothing else, I will enjoy it because it's a lot of fun. So.
What do you think about giving the opening disclaimer up front that's somewhat generic, and that would allow us to lead right into sort of the first, meat and potatoes kind of topic?
That's a great idea. Mm-hmm.
All right. So, yeah, I guess it makes sense to offer a disclaimer on some of the subjects that I'm going to cover.
Yeah.
It concerns mostly closed-minded people. Some people are very attached to certain ideas, right?
Yeah.
And there's a phrase that I like to say is that closed-minded people are the architects and wardens of their own mental prisons.
Man, that's awesome.
It's
Yeah.
oftentimes said that like a prophet has no honor in his own home, or within his own family or in his hometown or homeland. I think about, imagine if you were college roommates with someone who became one of the wealthiest people alive. You didn't live the same life before you lived together. You didn't have the same genetic composition or the same living environments for your most formative years. But many people, if they found themselves in that situation where they were roommates with someone who went on to become the most wealthy person alive, they would probably compare their life to that roommate's life. It's almost like cohabitation was the beginning of a race where victory was undefined. It's similar to the family rivalries that often manifest between, in particular, siblings vying for their parents' attention. It affects cousins too, and even spreads across generations, classmates, neighbors, coworkers. It's a seemingly endless set of concentric circles, each representing another larger league within which one will inevitably be confronted with some kind of ego contest. It doesn't have to be that way, though. If two people can operate in a loving, honest way in which each is willing to yield to the other, it won't be an ego contest. Just like, physical violence, it only takes one party to cast a vote for conflict. And when that happens, that's exactly what the situation becomes: conflict. If only one person is ego driven, the situation becomes vampiric and abusive. If both people are ego driven, it becomes a war. In the case where only one party is ego driven, the ego driven party is extremely likely to project ego drive in the other party. The projection's purpose is essentially justification by whataboutism, also known as tu quoque in Latin, which means you too. So if Alice thinks Bob is just trying to climb the corporate ladder like she is, she can justify treating Bob in self-serving ways under the assumptions that he is attempting to do the same thing to her, whether or not that is true. If it's not true, Alice may simply assume that she is dominantly superior to Bob in this game he isn't even playing. It often gets so bad that Kafka traps are imposed upon Bob, where no matter what anyone says, including Bob himself, Alice will never believe that Bob isn't behind some perceived slight, pulling strings, making conniving plays. So like you take that situation and apply it to a legitimate prophet or an enlightened person. Now it's not just your family, friends, neighbors, and coworkers who will deny you honor. It's the majority of the planet who will deny you honor because you're not on their team, so to speak. Even amongst the religious tradition from which the prophet comes, most will deny the prophet. As the Colburn Bible states, quote, "Alas, they who are heavily enshrouded in earthly wrappings are ever set of face before the instructors of wisdom. They say, what have we to do with this babble? Yet they, most of all, require enlightenment, for they are men of small minds," end quote. Note, a small mind may still be very capable. The smallness is a measurement not of matter or volume or anything physical. It's a measure of the square footage of the mental prison one has built for oneself by prejudicially declaring certain paths not worth exploring without ever having explored them. The honest person withholds judgment of a path's worthiness, at the very least, until they've walked it for themselves. Having said that, the process of verifying the ideas that I will present in future content with you, it's ongoing and is always expected to remain ongoing. Despite that, there's ample cause for confidence in the overall perspective. Again, it's like putting together a complex jigsaw puzzle that consists of puzzles within puzzles and puzzles interconnected with other puzzles. But instead of having all the pieces, like I said, you've got all these trash bags containing the pieces you need, along with a bunch of other pieces you don't need. All the trash bags have to get sorted through. There's no way of getting around it. All the pieces must be inspected, categorized in various useful ways, considered, and eventually fitted into the puzzle somewhere, unless it's one of the pieces not needed. That begs the question of how does one know which pieces aren't needed? Well, for starters, you have to be very patient for a long time and have a lot of proof of work to get to a point where you could reasonably make such a determination correctly, but it is possible. If you actually have the puzzle put together properly, it's evident on its face because the pieces fit together and a picture emerges more and more with continued progress. This is the cause for confidence in this perspective. So many things fit together in a way that is mutually validating that Occam's razor enters the conversation. Any given person has a set of assumptions, a set of knowns, let's call those answers, a set of known unknowns, let's call those questions, and a set of unknown unknowns, which is questions they don't even know they have yet. So if Alice shares her perspective with Bob, and Alice's perspective, in comparison to Bob's perspective, reduces Bob's number of assumptions, increases Bob's number of knowns, resolves some of Bob's known unknowns, questions, and exposes some of Bob's unknown unknowns, Occam's razor suggests that Alice's perspective is, at the very least, less distorted than Bob's legacy perspective, and is therefore a worthy candidate perspective for Bob to consider for adoption. Knowledge can be a bit of a hydra, though. If you cut off one head, two grow back. Likewise, if you answer one question, oftentimes it leads to multiple new questions or known unknowns. So while Alice may help resolve some of Bob's legacy questions, her perspective is also likely to convert legacy unknown unknowns into known unknowns, like known questions. So in light of that, if Alice shares her perspective with Bob, and Alice's perspective in comparison to Bob's perspective reduces Bob's number of assumptions, converts some of Bob's known unknowns or questions to knowns or answers, and converts some of Bob's unknown unknowns into known unknowns, questions, Occam's razor suggests that Alice's perspective is at the very least less distorted than Bob's legacy perspective and is therefore a worthy candidate perspective for Bob to consider for adoption. As people consider the perspective that my research has distilled over the last few years, I would encourage everyone to actually try to do a side-by-side comparison of your legacy perspective you brought with you into this exchange of ideas and the perspective that will be shared in this content in terms of assumptions, knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. Keep track of what assumptions were gained or lost, what questions were answered, and what new questions were generated. Dogmatists are heresy hunters, and as such will throw the baby out with the bathwater rather than explore the line of nuance that weaves through such topics. Imagine you heard that a restaurant has amazing food and you go there to challenge the head chef to prepare you his or her best dish. This dish takes time and many steps to create, but you impatiently move in on what the chef is doing after just 5 minutes and sample the work in progress. Obviously, the chef is only 5 minutes into preparing the dish. It's nowhere near complete. If you keep interrupting the chef every couple of minutes to sample the dish, you're probably going to find what you sample to be less than pleasant, and you'll likely lose any appetite you had, which means you'll never actually try the dish. It's not any way to proceed. Let the chef cook. In other words, suspend your objections until the end. Pause and note them down if you like, but cross them back off as they are addressed. The closed-minded dogmatist is the one who most needs the lesson of the camel in the eye of the needle, or the empty Zen cup, or the empty cup Zen koan. You know, both lessons are pointing at the idea that you must be willing to second guess your preconceived notions, lest they wall you off from finding things that are worth finding, simply because you chose not to pay the cost and look. The closed-minded dogmatist is the one who most needs to learn these things. Dogmatism itself is often a fawn response to survival situations as a kid. Kids realize they'd better not bite the hand that feeds them, so they fawn to their captors, who also happen to be their caretakers. They fawn as opposed to the other F responses like fight, flight, or freeze. This often leads to a blind adoption of the caretaker's perspective without thorough examination of this perspective for inconsistencies or flaws. With that said, we can still love our caretakers for having done the best they could as they attempted to inform us, to prepare us to deal with the challenges of this world. At the same time, we can maintain an open mind guarded by discernment. We can be willing to challenge the teachings we were taught growing up, explore new ideas, and seek truth with a total willingness to relinquish previously held beliefs when presented with sufficiently compelling information. So this content aims to offer scientifically viable explanations for a number of extraordinary or paranormal phenomena. This includes a dive into cataclysmology, which can be a bit of a doomy, gloomy subject. This content is not intended to inspire fear. It's intended to bring about understanding. So before we jump into the subject of ancient apocalypses and lost civilizations, first I want to offer a white pill topic to set the baseline. And I think that's kind of the end of my disclaimer and leads into the first topic there.
I think that's a perfect, because we gave a couple hour disclaimer to your disclaimer. So I think that was a very succinct way to put it, for sure. Okay, so why don't we end it here, and then, because we can go through. What I'll do is I'll put all of your information and stuff, the stuff that you're doing, in the description, but then we can kind of go over that stuff at the end, maybe of the very last one. Again, just talk about it. But since most of the time I don't even listen to that part, I just look in the description how you can get in touch with them. So I'll add that. Anything else you want to add before we close up this section?
I guess just to sort of complete the teaser, the first topic that I'm going to get into is the science of reincarnation.
Awesome.
So that is hopefully a white pill topic for the cataclysmology stuff, so that people don't think to themselves, wait a minute, what if this happens during my lifetime? I feel cheated, like I didn't get to live a full life or whatever if this winds up happening. Well, you've probably lived lives before, and you're going to have more opportunities to do it again ad nauseum.
Right.
We are eternal souls. So
Right.
I look forward to subsequent episodes with you and unrolling this bounty of content that I've got prepared. So,
me too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was a good intro.
Yeah, me too. I appreciate it. Let me figure out how to